Well, as promised, I wanted to introduce you to the person I made this carving for. This is Clegie Blackwell, and she is the trophy of God's grace that I mentioned. Clegie, can you tell us a little bit about your life before you came to Christ?
Oh, my life before I came to Christ was not good. I was shooting meth, about $300 worth of meth a day. And I did that for many years, about 20 years. And I also lived a lesbian lifestyle. I didn't think that there was any hope for me ever coming out of that. I thought I was just stuck as an addict. I would die an addict, and that's what I had become.
And how did you come to be what you are today?
I got touched by the hand of God. I got radically saved 5 years ago, and it was the preaching of the gospel about Jesus Christ dying on the cross and His blood. And then I saw a vision of the Lord on the cross, and then I thought about all my sin, and I began to weep. And the Lord looked at me and told me that He loved me. And I began to cry even more. And I said, well, if you love me after all that, then I'm going to live my life for you. And I got up and went home and tore down a meth lab that I had in my home. And I began a relationship with Jesus Christ. My life now is so wonderful. It's hard to believe. I have joy that won't go away. I have the peace at night. I can lay down and get a good night's sleep. And I've never been so happy in my entire life. And it's not always easy, but He's always there to help me through everything. I came to Him broken. I came to Him addicted. I came to Him a very down, negative, bitter person. I came to Him that way, and He brought me out of all of it. He's healed me, restored me. He's given my relationships that I had destroyed while I was an addict. He's restored all that back to me. I can't tell you that I went for 40 years without talking to my own father.
Wow.
And I had a prayer of forgiveness that day I got saved. And my dad showed up at my house a week later, and we began a relationship. And that was nothing but the hand of God, because we went 40 years of my life without even saying 30 minutes worth of words to one another. And the power of God has changed it. He has restored my relationships back to me. And I'm able to reach out to others that are struggling. And basically all I do is introduce them to Jesus. And He steps in, and His power and His words, His gospel, and they begin a relationship with Him. I'm in a ministry called Shift, and God's made me an ordained minister, and I honor that. But it seems like all I have to do is be obedient to show up and to have His word, and we worship Him, and He shows up in a mighty way.
What does shift mean?
Shift stands for seeking holiness, intimacy, freedom, and transformation.
You mentioned relationships, and you mentioned the anger. What would you say would happen if you had left those relationships untouched and uncorrected?
Well, in order for you to be forgiven, you've got to forgive others and take responsibility for your own hardness of heart And once you do that, it releases you. That means so much to the Lord. And He really works with the forgiving part and the honesty and transparency. That's another thing that we do at Shift. There's freedom to talk about the roots of the problem. And the roots go down pretty deep. But once you start going down to those deep roots, that's really what your fruit of addictions and things that stem from was the very root. So that's one thing that we go for at Shift. He came to set the captives free, and He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And I'm living proof that He will set you free, because who the Son sets free is free indeed. And I'd be willing to help you if you contacted me and lead you through a deliverance team that we have here at our church. We're blessed with that. We've all got sins, but there is that freedom and security there. And, you know, it helps to be around other people, but not people that call themselves an alcoholic. You never want to say, hello, my name is Rick, or my name is Clegie, and I'm an alcoholic.
Really?
You are calling yourself, you're prophesying over your life. And what you want to say is, hello, I am His. And that's another thing we do, is our identity is in Christ Jesus. And once you know who your identity is, these other problems are nothing. Satan can't hit you with the red apple once you know who you are in Christ.
I was at Shift just a few nights ago, and one of the things that just totally overwhelmed me was the total freedom of worship. And people can minister one to another. And it's not just Clegie ministering to everybody. Everyone was ministering to everyone else. And I was in awe over it. And I loved coming to Shift. Every time I come to Shift, there's just such an open freedom. And Clegie really warmed my heart the other night. She said that I was adopted by Shift.
Yeah.
That just meant so much to me. You see why I wanted to introduce her to you. She is truly a trophy of God's grace. So, thank you for sharing that with us tonight. And now we'll get back to a little bit of sawdust.
Thank you for having me.
Well, this last segment's going to be tough because I can't use any of my favorite toys. Can't use my fancy bandsaw, can't use my drill press, my oscillating spindle sander, my router table, or even my scroll saw. But I did promise you I was going to show you how to make the same project with just the basic tools. So, our first high-tech tool that we're going to introduce is this bad boy right here. Yes, the coping saw. If you take a close look at that vicious creature, it has teeth all over it. Yes, this is the same kind of blade as what you find in a scroll saw, but you're the motor. So it takes a little bit of patience. The next high-tech tool that we're going to use is this sandpaper. It takes a long time to master a piece of equipment like this. But there is one secret ingredient, and that is going to be this very high-tech tube of latex caulk. Now we're not going to use any latex caulk, we're just going to use a tube. So let's get started over at the, well, can't use a table saw. Okay, so we are going to use the bandsaw, but only as something to clamp the wood onto. So I'll just grab a couple of clamps, make sure my wood is secured to the edge of the table. So now I position my high-tech tube of caulking here and mark a circle there. Alright, so now we're ready to fire up this coping saw. Now if you have a saw like this, you can save a lot of time cutting out shapes, especially in hard or thick wood. This saw is called a jigsaw, or some people call it a saber saw. And like all saws, the results that you get depend on the blade that you use. Now for this test, I'm not going to try to cut a specific shape, but I'm just going to see how tight a turn I can make with the saw blade. So I have my wood tightly secured to the edge of the table, and let's fire it up and see what happens. I think I turned a little bit too tightly and we have smoke. So this next blade is a much narrower blade, so it should be able to make tighter turns, but it also has viciously large teeth. So the narrower blade was able to make a much tighter turn. This is a very fancy blade with teeth on both sides, and it claims that it can do extreme tight radius turns. So let's see what it does. Well, I don't think that was any better than the other one. Alright, this blade has very small teeth and it's very narrow. Let's see what it does. Yeah, not bad. So the narrower the blade, the tighter the cut you can make. Now, the reason I said that this tube of caulk is our secret weapon is I did not do a great job of making this cutout. It's rough, it's not totally vertical, not totally round. But since I marked the hole using this tube of caulk, if I wrap my sandpaper around it, when I start sanding, it's going to be sanding the exact shape that I was trying to cut in the first place. So just a few strokes with the sandpaper, and now I have a perfectly round and perfectly smooth hole. Okay, you've noticed I've switched from the bandsaw to the table saw. The bandsaw turned out to be too high to work comfortably at, so I moved over here to the table saw where I had some better ergonomics. Now, I was joking a minute ago about safety and talking about how you don't really have to worry about a coping saw because it's just not a very dangerous tool. Well, anything that can cut wood can cut you. And just to prove that, I was having trouble getting it to start in a cut, and it managed to jump out and get a little piece of me there. So respect every tool. Alright, so now we're ready to go with the router. And so I've clamped my board against the edge of the table, mounted my cove cutting bit in the trim router, and we're just going to use that and run down along the edges of the wood. So there you have it. $10 worth of tools, 10 minutes of effort, and I have the same beautiful cut that I did on my other project without all the fancy tools. But don't tell my wife. But I did cheat on this one because this very soft cedar took a whole lot less work than that piece of walnut would have required. I hope this segment has been helpful to encourage you that you can make beautiful work without all the fancy, expensive tools. If there's anything I can do to assist you, please feel free to email me. My email is richard@hiswordinwood.com. Love to hear from you. Thanks for watching.